Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the MyFootballWriter podcast. Whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us on Spotify, I'm Jack Wright or NCFC Payne on Twitter. I'm joined by Henry Miller, and we've got our guest again, Steve, who was a guest earlier this season when I was away on honeymoon. So this is technically the first time we've podded together. So welcome back, Steve. What's on the agenda this week? Well, what on earth is going on with this football club again? This roller coaster of a season has taken another turn upwards. Everything is fantastic, and we're going to finish in the playoffs, surely, right? Well, we'll dig into it. We'll dig into it. Before we crack into our podcast, just a quick word on our fantastic sponsors, as per usual, the Fat Cat and Canary. Freddie usually goes through a fantastic, wonderful, lovely pre-written script. I'm going to freehand it and just say that they're a fantastic, wonderful pub where you can get lots of drinks and food and fantastical stuff. And they've been great. So thank you, Fat Cat and Canary, for being our fantastic sponsors as always. Before we get into all things Norwich City, of course, Henry, Steve, how have you been in the last week apart from, the spanking of West Brom?
Yeah, I've been really good, thank you, mate. All keeping well. I have. It's that time of year where, despite the weather getting hotter, you always feel like a cold's coming on, and I don't know whether it's hay fever or whether it's just a cold. But yeah, I've not felt too great, but hopefully I'll be on the mend as the sun properly comes out.
Good here too. Highlight of my week: my son is in the process of going to college in America on a football scholarship. Wow. And this week we have been mostly sorting out his visa, which asks a series of questions that only an idiot would say yes to, such as, are you a terrorist? But I'll probably leave it there for fear of prejudicing his application, because I understand they monitor closely all those connected with him. And all I can say is America is great. Everything that's happening over there is great, and we're very excited that he will be over there soon.
Top notch. When we roll out the MFW politics podcast, we will divulge some more on that. Unfortunately, this is a politics-free zone. So obviously, best of luck with his application. Is it American football or proper football?
Soccer, as I am now prone to calling it, again, to adhere to US state government guidelines.
Of course. But of course, the English did invent the word soccer. So, it's on us. It's kind of our fault. So talking about soccer, a bit closer to home, instead of the United States of America, well, maybe linked to the United States of America, I just love America. It's great. Like, it's fantastic. They produce amazing footballers with fantastic ginger hair who win matches of football. It's, sensational. I have to say, we were talking just before we came on, just about the performance generally. Steve, you mentioned that it was a pretty dire affair. Obviously, Henry, you were following along with your Radio Norfolkisms. For the both of you, what was your assessment on what was possibly 95% a terrible match and then 5% absolutely brilliant?
Yeah, I think up until probably the last 5 or 10 minutes, we were well on course for a resounding Carrow Road boo and all sorts of acrimony. But obviously, the talisman, the legend that is Josh Sargent, won the points, scored the goal, and we get all the olays, we get the lap of honour, we get Gyökeres giving it the big fist pump at the end. So I'll be honest, I thought, it wasn't pretty a little bit like when I cleaned the house the day after. It wasn't fun to watch. It was pretty turgid, but ultimately it got the job done. I think for me personally, I was quite pleased, actually, because one of the concerns I've had this season is the fact that Gyökeres is so set on a way of playing that it's almost formulaic, that this is how we play, this is where you go, this is where you move. And we haven't necessarily seen him able to react to situations in the game or change the approach for particular opponents. But he shifted to a back five. So dropped Sorensen from midfield into a third centre back. And for me, that was the first sign that maybe he isn't this kind of ideologue that is just so fixated in one way of playing and can adapt. So I kind of took the positives, but I'm sure if Josh hadn't scored, I'd have been pitchfork, like flaming torch down by the Wensum, with the rest of them. But I don't know what you thought, Henry.
Yeah, to sort of jump on your point there, Steve, it just shows how reactionary football is as a sport. You know, as you were saying, I think Gyökeres showed real maturity in the way that he did change the formation and adopt a 3 at the back, 5 at the back, whatever you want to call it. But we needed to win the game, and we did. But we left it very late indeed. Had we have got the draw and it would have finished 0-0, yes, people still would have spun that and gone, oh, well, you know, it's a clean sheet at home. We've only had one of them this season. But also, that then would definitely be the nail in the coffin for playoffs. So, you know, as you touched on there, Steve, I think there would have been the pitchforks out, even had we have kept that clean sheet without Josh Sargent scoring. Being a Norwich City fan means that more often than not, you're a pessimist. And I think that even when Josh Sargent scored, there was an inkling of, okay, we're going to concede here. But the fact that Angus Gunn made a brilliant save and Rory McConville had that brilliant header off the line, fair play to them. And it's great to come away with all 3 points.
Yeah, I was obviously following it, and again, it felt like a very turgid performance is the best kind of word. I think you used that earlier, Steve. But it was just kind of lacking in tempo and kind of a little bit kind of lacking in ideas, and it didn't really feel like that was kind of the game plan. Like there was, you know, it was, oh, let's definitely sit deep, absorb all of the pressure, and then just rely on a moment of brilliance. I think it was lucky. And I think, obviously, like you said, the defensive shape, which isn't something we've seen previously this season, is obviously in reaction to all of our terrible concessions that we've had in recent games. But Henry, you touched on it. I think a turning point, a very late turning point, was the brilliant Gunny save and the clearance off the line. I think if that had gone in alongside, the concession at Blackburn and all the other late goals that we've conceded, that would just be very typical Torup Norwich of completely folding after, finding the brilliance to take the lead. And obviously there's been a lot of questions about how youthful this team is, how inexperienced this team is, how inexperienced this entire coaching setup is. Did we feel that sort of this was a step in the right direction in terms of pragmatism? Do we feel like kind of lessons have been learned? I mean, obviously after the, I think there was a City View that recorded Torup's reaction in the Blackburn changing room after conceding that late equaliser, and his very, very fruity language, which we kind of all love to hear. Do you think the players were listening, and do you think that's, a positive step in the right direction?
I think the impression that Gyökeres gives, isn't it, of someone who's very in control, who's very calculated in terms of what he says, and I like to see a little bit of that fire. I like to see glimpses of the fact that actually, do you know what? It's not just cold and methodical, that if things aren't good enough or if his players have let him down, then he's going to let rip. Unfortunate choice of expression, but I think we understand. And he is someone that clearly is, again, like the players on a journey. He's a young coach. He will make mistakes. He will learn. I think, again, he is on an upward trajectory. I think, going back to the point about the game, it would have been very typical of what we've seen this year if West Brom had managed to bag an equaliser after we had scored in injury time. We've seen that, and I think perhaps the crowd were expecting it. And for me, it's that sense of what the crowd obviously play a massive part in it. We've seen it in previous eras under Lambert, under Farker, where when you get into injury time and you have that belief in your team and you think, actually, do you know what? If you hold up 5 minutes, we back ourselves. As opposed to other eras where you think if you hold up 5 minutes, we are going to sit there as nervous wrecks because we don't trust the team. And I think this team so far hasn't earned the trust of the crowd. And therefore, you don't get that sense of self-belief. You don't get that sense of purpose. You just get this slight sort of edginess, this feeling of like we could blow it, because they've shown they're perfectly capable of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, as the cliche goes.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Steve, in terms of Gyökeres being on that learning curve. I think a lot of people who have called for his head this season do forget that he is a relatively young manager. It is his first job in English football. He's not going to come in and have all the answers straight away. He's going to make mistakes, and it's just management, especially in English football, is so cutthroat. The minute a manager does make a mistake, there will be calls for his head. But I think, where Norwich are at the minute, with not only massive changes going on the field, but also off the field, behind the scenes, with Delia and Michael and everything that's going on there, Norwich fans just need patience, and we need to give Torup time. We can see that his style of football is working. We're the second highest scorers in the league. We wouldn't be in that position if the football wasn't working. We just need to get tighter defensively, and that's what we did against West Brom. The question I have is, why didn't he do this earlier? There were glaring issues with the defence against Oxford, in my opinion. Yes, we only conceded 1 goal, but this size, I'm not saying that championship games are easy, but Oxford United at home is a game that you fancy Norwich City to come away with all 3 points, and they didn't, and there were glaring issues there. Fast forward a couple of days or so, and we chuck away 2-goal lead against Sheffield Wednesday and lose the game. So it's clear that those problems weren't addressed. If they knew how bad they were at conceding goals, especially at home, having kept 1 clean sheet at that point, why didn't they change it for the Sheffield Wednesday game? Why didn't they change it when they were 2-0 up and expecting Sheffield Wednesday and that Danny Roll size to come at them in the second half? Where was the change of formation there? But I guess me just saying that sort of contradicts my point. Maybe they didn't do that because Gyökeres Torup is inexperienced. And yes, maybe that was his mistake, but he should be given that time, and he will be given that time by Norwich to make those mistakes and learn from it, and then have evenings like the one against West Brom where he does make those changes. He does, for want of a better word, play that Brexit football, and we get the results.
Yeah, and I mean, my sort of view on the pragmatic side of it. I mean, when I was following the game, I was thinking up potential titles for the podcast, and I was thinking boring Baggies, or kind of Carrow Road drab fest. Just because if it had finished 0-0, it probably would have been one of the most boring matches in Norwich's history. And I think I saw a comment online that was about if Wagner had been playing football like that, then those hallowed pitchforks definitely would have been sharpened. It is difficult because essentially what we are saying is, why can't Johannes Hoff-Torp find a style of play where we can be defensively good and brilliant in attack, which is kind of the thing that every manager is trying to figure out.
Jack, it's the holy grail, isn't it? It's like, and this is what all football fans want. It's like, I want us to be expansive and absolutely amazing in attack and not concede goals. And it sounds so simple. And yet ultimately, as we've seen over the eras, over the different managers, there is always a trade-off. If you want to shore up your defence, you're not going to be as expansive. And we saw that Saturday because, again, we sacrificed the midfielder to bolster the defence. And again, if I was in Torup's position, I'd be sitting there going, okay, so like whatever we are, almost top scorers in the division, certainly in the top 2 or 3. We've got all of these stats and metrics that suggest going forwards we're brilliant. And yet everyone's been sitting there pointing the finger saying, yeah, but you're too easy to score against. You don't keep clean sheets. Your keeper's a nightmare. And then you have a performance where you keep the clean sheet. And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, but that was really boring. You'd be like, lads, what more can I do? Apart from achieve the holy grail of that blend of super attacking football and being completely unbeatable at the back. So it's, I do feel for it.
And it is definitely difficult as well to have that blend of both. You know, look at probably my favourite season supporting Norwich, that 2018-19 season. I think Norwich, the team who finished first in the Championship, conceded more goals than Stoke, who finished 17th, 18th that season. But we were outscoring teams. If a team came to Carrow Road and scored 3, that's fine because we'd score 4. We're not in that. We're not in that position. Yes, we've got the Championship's top goal scorer, and we've got Josh Sargent, who's probably one of, if not the form player in England at the minute. But take away those two, and you've got Cianats, who's got a decent return, but that's it. And whereas I feel like, yes, most of those goals in the 18-19 season came through Pukki and Buendia. But the fact of the matter is, everybody else was contributing, and you just knew that they were so good going forward that conceding goals didn't matter. Whereas now it's almost like, okay, well, if we concede, give it to Sainz and give it to Sargent and hope they produce something. And most of the time they do, but it's not that guarantee that it was like in the 18-19 season. I think the only season I can remember that Norwich were probably really good going forward and solid at the back was the one where, unfortunately, there was no fans in attendance.
I'd say I remember it. Well, I do remember it. I just didn't see a single match of it. I think there is obviously a reliance that kind of, if you are playing defensively, that you have just got Sargent and you have just got Sainz. So just give the ball to them and they'll just do something. But then we'll also sit back with 5 in defence and then not concede. And you kind of mentioned there, Steve, about earlier about the fans not trusting this kind of process and this style of play. I think we are second, if not the highest home scorers in the Championship. So, not many other stadiums have had that many goals as Carrow Road. So it is funny kind of how fickle the fans can be. Obviously, one of the kind of fickle moans, even pre-match, is the inclusion of Jakob Sorensen in midfield. Obviously, he kind of slotted in as kind of a centre-back for most of the game. You do have to feel for him being a utility player, because if you are a utility player, it means you're not very good in one position. lots of people are obviously kind of pointing the finger and saying, well, if this is a transition season and we're probably, not going to achieve much this season, why not give Jacob Wright a game? Why not give Rory McConville a game if Callum Doyle is out? Why use someone like Shane Duffy when there are youth options that aren't being played? Forson has been on the bench and not used, and has even played for the under-21s. What are you guys' thoughts on that inclusion of these youth players? If there is nothing really to play for, should we be bedding in these players who are destined for the first team, or should we at least try and go with the players who clearly Torok trusts?
I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I think Torok would have his favourites and will have people there who he believes can do the job. And there probably will be a stage of the season where mathematically there's nothing to play for. But when you're in professional football, you want to win every game, and Norwich City know that, and they'll put a starting lineup out against Cardiff on the final day of the season, even if they've got nothing to play for, wanting to win the game, and will put the best squad out possible. I get both arguments. I personally would love to see youngsters in the team and players who have committed their long-term future to Norwich in the team, but obviously it doesn't always work out like that, and that's fine as well. But I think something that is quite alarming there, as you touched on, Jack, Forson never really had a run out in the team. He looked decent when he first broke into the side, but ever since then, other than the Coventry game, he's been very hit and miss that you have to maybe ask questions about. Same with Mate Gyökeres. He came to the club in January, and we've all been told the narrative coming out of the club is that he's not physically ready for the demands of Championship football yet. So, is that something that Napa has to take responsibility for? And is that something that maybe our recruitment has to come into question, that we've got players on loan, but the players who we have bought, some of them aren't even ready to come in and hit the ground running? Is that a concern?
Right, couple of things here, boys. I'm well up for this one. So I think just about your point around, do we now almost accept that we're mid-table? I mean, I think an awful lot of fans probably accepted mid-table right from the start of the season. But do you expect your team to go out there and try and win every game? Yes, you do. So I think if they weren't trying to put out the strongest 11 that we've got, that they'd face criticism. Realistically, I think the previous 4 games before West Brom put paid to the playoffs, as far as I was concerned, that was our real opportunity. Those 4 games, I think we picked up 2 points, blew a whole load of positive positions in that period. I think for me, despite the fact we're 5 points off, so mathematically it's doable. But realistically, this side is too fallible to have that kind of run that would push us through. Maybe I'm wrong. So I don't think, whilst the temptation is there to say, okay, build for next season and actually play the players and give them the experience, I think he's in a position where he has to be seen to be trying to push for that 6th spot. On to your point about the recruitment and building. So I had an argument. I was going to say a healthy discussion, but let's call it what it was. It was an argument with a mate around Gyökeres. And he was like, well, why did we bring him in now? And it's like, well, actually, because the narrative we've had with other players like Sargent is how long it takes them to settle in a new country, to a new environment. So is he contributing to the first team? No. But there's part of me that goes, whilst he's around the group, whilst he's in a new country, whilst he's suddenly going, this is my home, this is the new language, everything else, it potentially helps us for next season. And if Gyökeres was firing right now, would he have been the difference in taking us to the playoffs? Debatable, bearing in mind the defensive frailties. So I think I kind of get it. I kind of get bringing the players, getting them as part of the group, getting them kind of comfortable in their surroundings, so that actually after the summer, after a pre-season, you're suddenly sitting there kind of going, this is not someone going, hello, I am the new signing. And it's just like, so yeah, I like what Napa's done. I think that the big thing, and I appreciate this is rapidly becoming a rant, so Jack, feel free to mute me if you can remotely. But I think the biggest concern that I've got, and it touches upon the points we've made around, the crowds, the fans' expectations. There are people like myself who are unusually tolerant and have refrained from booing and have refrained from all the nonsense, largely because I sit there and go, yeah, it's a little bit like the Only Fools and Horses, which is probably my era, not yours. But it's like, this time next year, Rodney will be millionaires. And you kind of go, oh, yeah, but you remember Farker. He had a mediocre first season, and then, wow, we swept all that came before us. And I think, certainly for fans like myself, I have an expectation that we're bedding in, we're bringing in the right players, and then in the second season, my God, it's going to be beautiful. And what if it's more of the same? What happens if Siernac doesn't become the player that we hope he is? What happens with all the other youngsters that we're bringing in? What happens if it's still mid-table? And the reaction, I think, across the fan base that you might get if it doesn't follow that pathway that we all, because we're drawing the analogies, right? We're sitting there kind of going, right, okay, so it was Webber, now it's Napa, it was Farker, it's now Torup. And we all know how the script goes. So, be patient, lads, because this is going to be beautiful. And it's not a given. They need to be really smart in the summer. They need to find the Buendia and the Pookie who came in that kind of second summer, which is, again, by no means a given. They need to hope that the players who are here now kick on. And we've all seen, again, in terms of the money that we spent, the signings that we bought in the past, that it can be a bit of a flip of a coin. So, it will be fascinating what happens across the summer, but most importantly, what happens pre-Christmas next season, I think.
Yeah, very, very good point. I mean, you say about us wanting to follow in Farker and Webber's footsteps. We don't want to follow them directly because, we'll go up the path to the nice sort of view at the top of the hill. You know what comes on the other side of a hill, a trip and a fall. And A&E, and then another hill, and then an even deeper valley that we're still stuck in. Geography metaphors, but yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I guess it is just kind of impatience, because we don't want to sit around and wait for Farker 2.0. We want it when we want it now, and I think in terms of Eurosec especially, I think we get a bit of kind of Zolis PTSD, because it's kind of like, he's young, he's a winger, he's brilliant, he's fantastic. He's definitely going to be good, right? He's definitely not going to, go away to someone else for not a lot of money and then star in the Champions League and be linked to Atletico Madrid and all these fantastic clubs for loads of money, right? I mean, who knows? He is one that you could look at as potentially give him a summer, give him a little run out at the end of this season, and then a whole pre-season to bed in, and could be a star come August. But I'm going to make a very tenuous link to someone who starred in this game on Saturday. Probably people's underrated man of the match was Angus Gunn, who got his first full clean sheet of the season. The one against Hull was only a half clean sheet, so he had to share it with our dear friend George Long. So if anyone has been on my Twitter today and seen the compilation video that I've made about George Long, the proof is in the pudding. If you haven't seen it, go away and watch it later. But Angus got his full proper clean sheet of the season and pulled off some actually brilliant saves in what has otherwise been a very disappointing season for him. I don't want to ask you, do you think he'll sign his new contract? Because that's a boring question. I'm going to ask you an even more boring question. How did you rate his performance?
I think you're spot on. That was by far the best performance of the season from Angus Gunn. He was back to the Angus Gunn of old, dare I say. And I thought some of the saves he pulled off in the first half were brilliant. But that save in the last minute, the one that led to McConville heading it off the line as well, match-winning stuff, literally. So, yeah, fair play to Angus Gunn, but it's his best performance of the season. It's not even comparable to anything because, as you said there, Jack, he's had a very underwhelming season. I've really not been impressed with Angus Gunn at all this season. But he definitely covered himself in glory against West Brom, and rightly so, because, yes, goals win matches, but also key saves from goalkeepers win matches, especially when you're 1-0 up with seconds left to play. So the fact that he did keep his cool, keep his composure, and was able to pull off such a vital save, we've come away with 3 points thanks to Angus Gunn. So, yeah, huge result, not just for Norwich, but for Angus Gunn himself, because he needed that.
Oh, mate, that's spot on. I mean, your point about the value of a keeper at Championship level, you only have to look at Leeds' result and the role of Meslier. I mean, Mellier's a good keeper, but he's cost them points. And I think any side that has aspirations of Championship playoffs needs a keeper that will win you points, and that's what that Angus did on Saturday. I mean, I think it's interesting because, I mean, the first save he had to make was one that was straight at him. He went down to try and collect the ball at his feet, rebounded off, and just went the wrong side of the post. That could easily have crept in the far corner, and everyone again is kind of going, "Oh, mate, what are you doing?" I think by his own standards, he has not had a good season, but I guess the acid test for me is how much more confident do I feel when I see that Gunn is in net as opposed to Long or Reyes or anyone else that we might bring in. When he's playing well, when he's on form, he's an exceptional keeper at this level, I think, and it was nice. I think it was really important that he showed it.
I will say though, obviously, when a keeper puts in such a performance, it does lead to fans getting carried away. The people who are saying, "Oh, we won't find better goalkeepers in the Championship." For me, the proof is in the pudding this season. If Angus Gunn goes, I want Angus Gunn to stay. And if he doesn't stay, I want us to get money for him at least. So, a contract should be on the table. But I think it's an absolute myth that we wouldn't be able to find a goalkeeper as good as Angus Gunn. This season he's been average at best, I'd say. So there clearly is scope to improve. I just hope we can get a fee for him if he's not in our long-term plans.
And again, if we do let him go, it will at this stage obviously be on a free. Just offer him like a 1 year or a 2 year, and then if we don't fancy him again, maybe try and sell him to one of the teams that's coming up. Well, who will it be? I'm sure Leeds are probably going to go up and probably need a keeper, maybe. But yeah, I mean, I look at Angus Gunn and I think this is a goalkeeper who we signed for. How much did we sign for in the end? Like 5 or 6 million from Southampton in order to be a Premier League starting goalkeeper. So the expectations were there for him to be, at the top level. Obviously, where his future will be, we don't know. I'd quite like him to stay. Whether we experiment and go for someone like a what's his name, Beadle, who plays for Sheffield Wednesday on loan from Brighton. He seems pretty decent. Or we could go down the experience route and go back to John Ruddy because he's just won the Carabao Cup and he's clearly got top pedigree. Another tenuous link, a player who's got top pedigree. We can't not talk about him any longer. I mentioned about him earlier. Let's talk about Josh Sargent because I want to, because he's lovely and he makes me happy and he makes everyone happy. He's not going to stay, is he? Obviously. And if he does, it's because Mark and Mike have, slipped in, an extra little add-on in his contract and literally done whatever he wants. I mean, rename Carrow Road to the Sargent Arena, like do it, because you cannot replace a player of that quality. And again, I've said it earlier in the season, shame on all of you championship strikers, whereby the top scorer in the league is a winger, followed by Joel Pirot, blah, blah, blah. Best striker in the league? No. And then it's Josh Sargent, who's missed a third of the season. And then I think it's someone like Josh Brownhill or something, who's a midfielder. Where are all the strikers in the championship this season? Anyway, I'll tell you where one of the really good ones is. He's at Carrow Road, and he's fantastic. I kind of have this weird feeling that, obviously he's not going to stay, and obviously we're going to ask for, a sizable fee for him, something, 20 to 30 million. We'll then eventually sell him for 7.5, as per usual, with no sell-on fee whatsoever. I kind of look at someone like a Victor Gyökeres, who was playing championship level for Coventry and was doing, fairly well, and has now gone off to Sporting and is now linked to Arsenal and is now one of the absolute elite strikers in Europe and one of the most prized assets for any club. Is it hyperbolic to say that Sargent could go to a Premier League team or a European giant and tear it up there? It's just the way that he just seems to have the ideal profile of the perfect striker, just seems to come up with important goals when we need it. I mean, and this match was a perfect example of that. So do you think that he could kind of live up to that potential, or do you think I'm being really silly?
No, I think so. I think you've definitely got a valid point. I've made this comparison on the podcast before, but to me it feels like Dominic Solanke. I feel like when he first was breaking through at Chelsea and at Liverpool, he was pants, to be honest with you. He wasn't that great at all. And then the best thing for him in his career that he could have done was stay at Bournemouth when they were in the Championship. He got goals in the second tier, stayed with them when they got promoted, and then last season he was a massive part of that Bournemouth team, and it did earn him that move to Tottenham, albeit Tottenham is a poison chalice, but he's done pretty well this season, and they are one of the biggest and richest six teams in the Premier League, and there's no reason why Josh Sargent can't do the same. I think where it's similar as well is that I think the best thing for Dominic Solanke at that point was staying in the Championship with Bournemouth, getting minutes, getting regular goals under his belt, and getting his confidence up. And it was the same with Josh Sargent. We all saw him in the Premier League for Norwich. He couldn't hit a barn door. He was awful. Genuinely, he was the worst striker I've ever seen at Norwich, bar Marley Watkins, I think, in that Premier League season. He was dreadful. And then stayed in the Championship. Yes, he was played out on the right, but if anything, Pookie leaving released the next level of Josh Sargent because he was playing through the middle, and he's reaped the rewards for that. And now he's scoring every game, doesn't look like slowing down. And yeah, I think he's more than capable of slotting into a Premier League side and really hitting the ground running. He's got a taste of English football now, and he's performing well. So there's no reason whatsoever why he can't score the goals in the Premier League. And I fully expect him, if he does decide to stay in England, it will be with a Premier League club. If he, or more realistically, when he leaves Norwich, it will be for a Premier League club. And I've no doubt he will score goals on a regular basis.
He's got the talent. He's got all the attributes. I think it's the nuances of any move, isn't it? Right here, right now, playing for Norwich City in the Championship, he's a world beater. You can take him into a different environment and things don't kind of sit right. And I think if you look at the conveyor belt of talent that we've moved on over the years, that it's like, okay, you've outgrown Norwich City, away you go. How many of them really would you say have kicked on and lived to their potential? I mean, you would kind of arguably talk about Maddison as being the one who, okay, via Leicester is now at a big club and on the fringes, but there's so many of them. Ben Godfrey, where's he now? But again, those players that you sit there and go, oh, you're the next big thing, and we bank the cash and we moved them on and went, thank you very much, you've been brilliant, on to bigger and better things. There's so many things that can go wrong in the career of a footballer in terms of, are you at the right club? Are you being played in the right system? Are you with the right teammates, working under the right manager? Right here, right now, Josh is unstoppable at championship football, championship level. I've got a question for you. So, I mean, if we talk about in the summer, there's probably the three jewels in the crown: Sainz, Nunez, and Sargent. Out of those three, who do you think is most likely to go, and who would you be most prepared to let go?
I think now it's got to the stage where the most likely to go is Josh Sargent, just because recency bias. I know Sainz is the top goal scorer, but it's fresh in people's minds just how good Josh Sargent has been. So I think he is the most likely to go. The one we're most likely to keep is Nunez, because he's one of those who obviously takes a back seat to how good Sainz and Sargent have been. But yeah, for me, I think Sargent is probably most likely. And I've heard the debate before of do everything you can do to keep those players and offer Sargent basically whatever he wants. And Norwich should do that. They definitely should try and keep both of their key assets in terms of Sargent and Sainz. But whatever we offer them, there will be teams, even at this level, that can offer them more. That is just a matter of fact. If you compare our financial situation, even with the Atanasios, who've got more money than Delia and Michael, to a Leeds, say, for example, or a Leicester, if they come down, it's incomparable.
I think, the most likely to go is Josh, and I think we should just stick a ginger wig on Onel and put him outside Caro and be like, if you want Josh, here he is. Bargain price today only. Come on, have him while he's hot. I mean, it is also now becoming a situation where Nunez is a really prized asset. I mean, we haven't even spoken about the fantastic through ball that set up the goal. Obviously, fantastic finish from Joshy. But I mean, Nunez has sort of very slowly and surely becoming one of our most important players. And obviously, no Sarah now has Nunez kind of filled the void. Oh, wouldn't you just love to have seen Sarah under Torrent ball? Oh, it would have been delightful. I think the most likely to leave is Josh, unfortunately. Sainz, he'll probably go. He's obviously going into the last 12 months of his contract. We'll probably look to offload him. Very confusing messages from Napa, where kind of earlier he was sort of saying, oh no, we're financially secure and don't need to sell our best players. But then I think Torrent came out, or one of them came out and said, we expect a summer of ins and outs, which, mixed signals. So maybe it just means that,
But also when Napa says we don't need to sell our best players, that is completely different to saying we won't sell our best players. That is completely different. And like I was saying, every single player has a price. I don't care if you're George Long or Josh Sargent. Every single player has a price tag. And should a club meet it and the club deem that, it's an offer they can't turn down, then that player will be sold. And it's the way Norwich City have always operated. And even with new owners, money talks.
I think it's wider than that, Henry. I think that's football, isn't it? Unless you're Real Madrid, arguably every club stands to lose their best players when somebody with a greater history, with more money, comes along and says, "How would you like this amount of cash?" And the player goes, "Yes, I would. Thanks very much." So, that's the nature of the game. And I think perhaps the difference now, when Napa says we don't have to sell, clearly we know that if an offer comes in which is too good to turn down and the player basically thinks the time is right for me to go, then the move is almost a certainty. But we can do it far more on our terms, whereas I think in the past it was a question of we need to recoup X amount of million to plug the hole in the account. And the impression I get, rightly or wrongly, is that the Atanasios have kind of solidified the account so that we are now in a position where we go, if you want Josh Sargent, it's going to cost us 20 million to get a replacement. So we need more than that. And, that's a better position to be in. And ultimately, it allows us to kind of, to dictate things a little bit more on our terms. I don't know whether you caught it on, I think it was Radio Norfolk, where Josh was interviewed about his comments in the American press about, there'll be options in the summer. And he did the textbook stuff of, "Oh, no, I'm very happy here. And all I was saying is," I think it's likely that he'll go. But I didn't get the impression that this was a player that was busting to leave necessarily or going to try and engineer a move. And I think that, again, will help the club secure the kind of money that ultimately that he's worth and that we deserve, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, Jonathan Rowe didn't seem like a player who wanted to go either. And then Oxford turned up. Well, he didn't go to Oxford, but you know what I mean.
He didn't turn up, did he? That's it.
He didn't turn up. There we go. But in a magical, theoretical world, which is still within our grasp, we might not need to sell all of our best players because 6th place in the table, it's not that far away. I mean, it is still quite a way away in terms of the chasing pack. We are very much at the back of it. Our very optimistic manager has said that it's possible. And in typical Norwich fan reaction, we've all gone, "You're an idiot, you're silly, stop talking nonsense, I don't believe you," as opposed to being like, "Okay, cool, like I back someone who is actually thinking positively." So let's all collectively think positively. Obviously, West Brom is now the gateway to the top 6. We have thus made it easier for the rest of that chasing pack to gain on them. Are we still part of that chasing pack? I mean, we're level on points with Blackburn, who were obviously one of the top dogs in the playoffs. Obviously not anymore. I think Chris Gorham said it, that if we win every match up until the end of the season, then we will equal David Wagner's total points from last season, which is bananas, really. But do you think 6th place is still possible right now as we speak on the 1st of April?
Absolutely not, no. And I think the reason why it isn't, I'd come back to what Steve was saying. The crux of our playoff push was down to those 3 or 4 games that we bottled before the international break. Had we have actually beaten Oxford and actually beaten Sheffield Wednesday, then maybe yes, but no, we definitely will not finish in the top 6. And we just have to finish this season as strongly as possible. But it is going to be difficult. I think people are expecting Plymouth to be a walkover. The last time we went there, we lost 6-2, and they're fighting. If it was at Carrow Road, I still would be confident. We beat them 6-1 at Carrow Road, but away from home, and especially now that they've got Muslic in charge and not Rooney, it is a banana skin for Norwich. So that one doesn't fill me with hope. Then we've got Burnley away, and Burnley at Turf Moor is the toughest fixture in the Championship this season, bar none. Bar none. So, yeah, Norwich aren't leaving Lancashire with any points. So, yeah, that's playoffs dead and buried then. And then just when we think it can't get any harder, we have Sunderland. And Sunderland, you could argue they've got nothing to play for, as they're basically guaranteed to finish fourth. But they'll want to build up the momentum now and go into the playoffs as the form side, because, chances are they'll face Coventry in the playoffs. And if Coventry have that momentum that they're getting under Frank Lampard, then Coventry could go into that tie as the favourite. So, yeah, Sunderland will definitely want to keep on churning away and want to make sure that they can sort of wrap up fourth spot in style, really. So the next 3 games, I think, will see that this whole talk around playoffs and the nonsense that surrounds it will be dead and buried, and we can just focus on finishing the season strongly and looking ahead to next season.
I could disagree, but then everyone would just say that's an obvious April Fool, and this channel deserves better. I think, Henry, you hit the nail on the head. The fact is that we're not consistent enough. When's the Burnley game?
It's on a Friday.
It's in 2 weeks' time, I'm pretty sure. Because
is that the one that you basically see like Burnley equal the record of clean sheets for the season or something? I saw that something on Sky Sports News that they're 2 games off the all-time clean sheets record. Because I quite fancy us going there and basically Josh Sargent scoring like a hat-trick and Borgia hitting form again and promotion fever gripping the city.
Obviously, I'll save it for next week's pod, but that game will finish 1-0 thanks to an Ashley Barnes winner. It's guaranteed. Yeah. It is guaranteed.
Off his backside as well or something. Typical House.
Yes, well avoided. Well, do I think positively that we're going to finish 6th? Yeah, I'll say yeah. Why not? Like, just for funsies. The team in that chasing packs, all those other teams, they're not that good. They haven't got Josh Sargent. They haven't got Borja Sainz. They haven't got goals in them. We can now defend. There's nothing stopping us. And when we go up, we're going to spend hundreds of millions. And unlike certain teams, stay up. Who knows? Maybe, who knows? Obviously we're talking about nonsense. We'll finish off with our favourite bit of nonsense, which is quickfire hot takes, which I have written in preparation. Let me find it on my phone wherever they are. People listening, if anyone's been listening this far, what do you think? Do you think we'll finish 6th? And if you're watching this in the future, let us know where we did finish, because I'm sure when we watch it in the future, we'd like to know. So I have 5 quickfire hot takes, quick as you like, because we're running out a little bit of time. So, classic starter, anti-man of the match versus West Brom.
Sorensen. He did nothing wrong. He did very little right. I've just got a personal vendetta against him. I don't even know why. He just looks like a really nice man. It must be me. I'm just a bitter person. I don't know why.
I'll go Sorensen because I can't think of anyone else. So sorry, pal, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you kept a clean sheet, I guess if you're any of the defence, then you're probably happy with that. Kenny in midfield probably had a bit more freedom.
I've got one.
Henry Miller.
Anti-man of the match, those 2 kids who ran onto the pitch.
Anti-man of the match, yes. or that silly man who proposed on the pitch at half time.
Oh yeah, him. Boo.
Yeah, you don't know what you're doing, mate.
Or rather, his fiance for not basically just going, "No, son," and then publicly shaming him in front of 26,000 people. That would have been a class move, to be fair.
Highlight, absolute highlight. Obviously, best wishes to them both, whoever they are. If you're listening to this podcast, good luck with the wedding.
No, awesome. Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. And if you need any tips about weddings, don't ask me. Mine was fine. Okay. What is your favourite? I might have asked this one before, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is your favourite last-minute goal by Norwich? Has to be Norwich, obviously.
Controversial. Mine's Martin Olsen against Newcastle.
Not controversial. Not controversial. I remember going absolutely ballistic when that happened, and I was at university. And no one else was a Norwich fan, and they were like, "Well, what are you doing?" And I was like, "This is the greatest thing to have ever happened, ever. This is amazing." And they were just like, "Okay, do you want to go for a beer?" I was like, "Yeah, 5." Yeah, it didn't work, but there we go. Go on, Steve. What's yours?
Simeon Jackson against Derby I think made it 3-2, and
classic.
Classic. Beautiful.
I remember hearing that on Radio Norfolk and going again absolutely ballistic. I have a little soft spot for Pookie's one against Millwall. I think that game, I think it just capped off what was a kind of a brilliant sort of narrative and was a really positive moment in a fantastic season. But I should also say the late one against Bolton, which is forgotten as much because it was the same sort of situation.
I think, being honest, that Millwall game, I think everyone in the back of their minds knew we were going up after that game. The fact that that wasn't the first time like a late show had happened, we all knew Norwich would go up after that, I thought.
Goes back to the point we made about trust, isn't it? You have those examples when it happens time and time again. It's the same thing. You hold up 5 minutes of injury time and the crowd roar. They're like, "Come on, boys," because you've got it in you. And it's those little moments, those examples, which actually give you the belief that these players have got the minerals and have got the ability to pull something out of the bag.
Slightly controversial one. Which opposition player has impressed you the most this season? Who's one player who we've come up against that you thought, whoa.
I know the Panamanian devil scored past him. It has to be James Trafford. It has to be. Like his numbers, his performances have been absolutely insane.
So this is a bizarre one. Barry Bannon, because he is probably about 76 now with really bad hair, and yet he still is one of the only players in English football who still gets both his names spoken in commentary. No one ever calls him Bannon. He is Barry Bannon, and that marks him out as something special. Now, I think he for me is a player that I've probably seen for 70 years across various games and what have you, and yet he still has the ability at championship level to dictate a game. And I thought in that second half at Sheffield Wednesday, he just clicked into gear and ran the show.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't sign him again because he's 76, but fair.
Well, when you reach my age, you go, "There's one for the future, lad." So it's
I mean, I was just thinking this watching West Brom that I like the look of. I think it's Tom Fellows. I think he's impressed sort of every time that I've seen him. But I think the one player who, especially in the game at home, Willie Nonto, I think he was really, really dangerous, and I have absolutely no idea how he's one of many players that Leeds have managed to keep in the Championship. And if not with Leeds, he'll be in a top flight team somewhere next season.
No, if not with Leeds, let's be honest, if not with Leeds, he'll be at Everton. He's the most Everton player ever.
Yeah, true. True. I mean, he has got a Jack Harrison about him. If Norwich went up, how much money would they need to spend in order to stay up? Would it be more than 150 million? Steve, you're going more than 150 million.
Yeah, I don't know what them down the road have spent. I think it's 120, 130, and they're not even close. And I think, regrettably, is this now likely to be the second season in a row where the 3 promoted teams have got relegated? I think the gulf has never been bigger. And so if you are a promoted side, I mean, you look at Forest now, what Forest have done and what they're doing currently is phenomenal. But their first season was like a circus. It was just like, we're going to bring in 30 odd players. We're going to spend God knows how many 100 million. And they survived by a gnat's whisker. So you kind of go, I fear for any team. I mean, as much as it is funny to see where Ipswich are in the league, it's also thoroughly depressing because, again, what's the model? You sit there and you go, right, okay, so for any team to get promoted, 120 million won't cut it. One of the most promising coaches in English football, supported by a squad which has got that cohesion, togetherness, and all of these shrewd signings they're making, and they're not even close. So
you are on a yellow card. There is an unspoken rule that
you can give me a straight red. It's no bother. I'll
also
give me a 6-game ban like Kenny McLean as well.
But also, to expand on that, we'll use a different example. Another team in blue and white, right? Leicester have been probably one of the, surprise stories of the last decade. And, 3-4 years ago, they were winning the FA Cup and finishing 5th in the Premier League. Now, similar, they are miles off. And they've never looked at any point this season, I don't think, that you look at them and go, oh, yeah, they'll stay up. And this is Leicester. This is the Premier League champions. These are the FA Cup winners. The team who's familiar with European football, and they've just been absolutely cut adrift.
Yeah.
So, I completely agree. The gap between the Championship and the Premier League has never been bigger. And you look at a team like Leeds, if it is the top 3 at the minute who go up, Leeds will have the best chance of staying up. But that is literally just because of the stature of the club and the money. Teams like Sheffield United, realistically, Sheffield United and Burnley have spent almost the last decade in the Premier League. They're not even going to come close next season if they go up. And look how good they've been this season defensively. I don't think they even come close. And that shows you the disparity between the Championship and the Premier League.
I actually think that, and this is, you said hot take, this is an L4 outtake, but I think actually the next team that may well break through could be one of the likes of a Birmingham or a Wrexham, ones that have been picked up by crazy investors in the lower leagues who have the money to spend and who basically have the willpower to throw cash at it. Because I think a lot of the Championship clubs will follow the model where they say, okay, if we get promoted, we'll spend 100 million. It's not enough. You do almost need someone who goes into League One, League Two, wherever, and says, this is a crazy project. We've got the cash and the investment to throw crazy money at it and the ambition to make it happen. I think we're going to see that yo-yo effect over the next few years until someone like a Birmingham actually comes through and says, right, do you know what? We're going to break the mold a little bit, perhaps like Forest did.
Yeah, and I'm an old man now. I miss the days where you could get promoted and sign James Vaughan and Anthony Pilkington and Elliot Bennett from League One Brighton, and you could get Richie Delar on loan from Man United, Carl Norton on loan from Tottenham, and then you'd finish 12th. Not to say that the league is changed, but it's It's utter woke nonsense, as we like to call it. How much money do I think Norwich would need to spend? The same as Farke's first season, 750 grand on Sam Byram, and that will do. Final one. Who would win if Hughton's squad from 13-14 played Dean Smith's Premier League team from, what was it, 21-22? No, 23-20. Dean Smith's team that got relegated. Time distracts me. Who would win out of those teams if they played each other?
This isn't a serious question, is it?
It is.
Of course, Chris Hughton's team would win. Of course. It's an absolute no-brainer. Chris Hughton's team, you did have those players who you trust, right? You look at Chris Hughton's team, you did have the likes of Bradley Johnson, Anthony Pilkington, who had done it at Premier League level before. If we're taking his first season, you had Grant Holt as well.
No, we're not taking his first season. We're taking 13-14 awful Joseph Yobo, Jonas Gutierrez, Chris Hughton.
But you say we're awful. We finished 18th and basically were in with a shout of staying up until the last few weeks of the season. That Dean Smith team were dead and buried the minute they got into the Premier League, to be honest with you. It's chalk and cheese. The Chris Hughton squad of 13-14 would annihilate the 21-22 squad, in my opinion.
So you're going to have to tell me how that one finishes, because I couldn't be bothered to watch that game. I think it would be. I'd rather watch a rewatch of the West Brom game from Saturday than watch Chris Hughton and Dean Smith in a tactical duel. It's like, when you say who wins, is it like who won the most throw-ins, or actually who won the game? Because I don't look back at either of those eras particularly fondly. But yeah, let's say Chris Hughton wins it on the basis he got 2 corners and Dean Smith got none.
I think it would finish 1-1, 2 own goals, and probably like both in the 96th minute. Would be absolutely apt for that. But yes, that's all your quickfire hot takes, and that is all of your podcast for this week. Obviously, as we've said before, we've got Plymouth coming up, so that should be exciting. Maybe. Obviously, thank you, Steve, for dropping in and being a fantastic guest, and thank you all for listening. If you've made it this far, this has been the My Football Writer podcast, and we will see you again very soon.